As Israel bombards Gaza, the dehumanization of Palestinians is reaching grotesque proportions on both sides of the Atlantic. Have a look at this moment in Florida's House of Representatives.
We are at 10,000 dead Palestinians. How many will be enough? One of my colleagues just said all of them. Wow. One of my colleagues said all of them. One of my colleagues also stated that this is going to dry up their fundraising if we vote on this resolution. I also want that, that's what we've become in this state. That's what we've become in this state, where we don't care about innocent babies that don't even get the opportunity to blow out their first birthday candle.
So she said, how many Gazans have to die? And a state representative, an elected representative, said all of them. All of them. Right? That's a call for the genocide of 2.2 million people, right? It was a Republican called Michelle Saltzman who said that. Now, unlike Rashida Tlaib, so we talked about her on a previous episode, Saltzman has not been censured. So Tlaib said, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, or at least she defended or justified other people saying that. And she was censured. She was the third person this century to be censured, which is sort of one step lower than being kicked out of Congress. The only Palestinian American in Congress. She was censured for saying that. Someone in the Florida House of Representatives said that every single Palestinian, 2.2 million of them, should die, and there have been no consequences. Just it's so appalling, right? It also doesn't seem that she is particularly rare when it comes to sort of viewpoints of Republicans. These were moments from the most recent Republican primary debate.
As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas.
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them.
I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border.
If you want to stop the 40-plus attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran.
They want to bomb Iran as well. Aaron, I mean, we've had lots of criticisms of Joe Biden, of the current American administration. Some people have sort of been sharing clips such as those and sort of saying, well, it would be even worse with the Republicans in power. I'm actually sitting on the fence with that. I've got no idea. I mean, I think if Trump was president, then it would have been more likely that Benjamin Netanyahu would have been able to sort of get away with his first choice, which was just to basically empty Gaza within sort of like a week. I can imagine Donald Trump saying, like, Egypt, you have to accept this, and then maybe that happening. I think the Democratic establishment is a bit more in favor of maintaining the status quo. But at the same time, the thing which is frustrating with the Democratic establishment is they're essentially saying they're giving Israel unconditional material support while saying, oh, we'd like them to be nice. So it might just be that the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is that, you know, the Democrats mean that you get to do ethnic cleansing but apologize for it, whereas Donald Trump would let them do ethnic cleansing and he'd say, and that's good, right? I mean, where do you stand on this, sort of the difference between if there were a Republican or a Democrat in charge at this moment?
Well, on foreign policy, I don't think there is much of a difference. Just generally, you look at China policy and whatnot. I think here, you're absolutely right. It would be, do ethnic cleansing, do genocide more slowly, please. Take your time. No rush. Looking at the candidates as well in the Republican primary, Michael, I mean, these aren't serious people. These are clowns. These are clowns. And they will all be beaten by Donald Trump as long as he stays out of prison. But they are clowns. And I think there was a great article in the FT yesterday talking really about how the Republican Party now, Michael, are incapable of administering an empire, which is what the United States is. I know people don't like to talk in those terms, but it is. These aren't people capable of administering an empire because that requires tact, diplomacy, thoughtfulness, strategy. None of these people have that. They're playing to the most base instincts of actually a minority of the American electorate. The point around Iran as well is just crazy. The attacks that are happening on US personnel in West Asia are overwhelmingly coming from Iraqi Shia militias in Iraq and in Syria. They're funded, they're armed by the Iranians, absolutely. But they're coming from the Iraqis. But the American political class can't say that. They cannot say that. And it's actually not being reported more generally in the UK either. Again, you'd have to read something like the FT, maybe The Economist. They're quite open about this now. The big variable that people really aren't talking about are these Iraqi Shia militias. They want to be in Gaza, some of them. They're presently not being allowed to cross various borders to get onto the Israeli northern border. So it's a pretty remarkable insight into, I think, a collapsing empire. You know, these are people who want to fight Russia, China, Iran, all at the same time. If the Europeans disagree with them, well, screw you. You can't work like that. And there's a reason why we're seeing comparative diminishing of US geopolitical, political, and economic strength vis-a-vis Asia in particular, not just China, ASEAN as well, those countries in South and East Asia bordering China. That's where power is moving, in part because of the idiocy of the American political class in the 21st century. I mean, it starts with George W. Bush. His response to 9/11 clearly accelerates the deterioration of American empire and power quite considerably. And this is the long tail of that. In terms of the comment as well made in that state legislature, you know, you look at a country like the United States today, Michael, 320 million people, maybe more. This was a country which didn't have any white settlers until the early 17th century, permanent settlers. And of course, the indigenous population has disappeared. They've disappeared precisely because of the exterminationist rhetoric that was being put out there and which was called out on camera. And if you want to know why Europeans exterminated people across much of Australasia, across the Western Hemisphere, sometimes too in Africa, if you look at what the Germans tried with the Herero tribes in southern Africa, for instance, that was also an attempted genocide. Or what happens with the Brits and Tasmanian Aboriginals in Australasia, this is where it comes from, okay? And I think for many of us, I'm sure some of our viewers watching and people listening later on, they knew that, right? They knew that this exterminationist bent within the, let's be frank, the white psyche. Of course, there have been many genocides in history. They haven't all been done by Europeans. I'm half Iranian. Genghis Khan killed, you know, many people in West Asia and Central Asia. But in modern history, the exterminations that I've just spoken about, almost all executed by white Europeans, we can see here where it's come from. You know, it's hard to understand, how did the Herero butchery happen? How did the Holocaust happen? How did what happened in the Western Hemisphere happen? When Columbus discovers Hispaniola and they just eradicate the domestic population, partly, of course, because of the transmission of pathogens, but not just that. Well, that comment crystallizes it very, very succinctly.